Okay, hello. I see people are starting to hop on, which is great. I will get started in a few minutes. I hope everybody can hear me okay. If you wouldn't mind just kind of typing into the chat. Yep, can hear you, no problem. Yep, people are starting to pop on, which is great. But yeah, if somebody wouldn't mind firing into the chat that they can hear me okay and that the audio is fine, I would appreciate that very, very much. And if nobody writes into the chat, then I get worried about my audio. Oh, there we go. Chat pops up. Audio's fine. Thank you, Andre. Appreciate it. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay. I did test it earlier today with my wife, and she said, yeah, it sounded fine, but you know, you still have these freakouts, right? So, so I appreciate very much letting me know. What I'm going to do is, while we're waiting for people to kind of pop on, I would imagine that most people are going to catch the recording. But for those of you here who are live, what I'm going to do is I'm going to launch a poll. And that poll just has 2 questions. But I would and I think it's anonymous, although I can't recall. But I mean, if it's not anonymous, I don't think it's that big of a deal. But 2 questions. So what category you might fall under, whether you're a first-time buyer, a move-up buyer, or a possible investor. If you're more than one of those things, just kind of pick, I guess, the thing that you are most likely to kind of be. And then question 2 would be, you're here probably because you feel like you've got an obstacle that's preventing you from taking a step forward. And what do you feel like that biggest obstacle would be? Whether it's affordability or down payment or both of those things, or kind of not knowing what to do in terms of options and that kind of stuff. So I would appreciate if you would be willing to do that. While you're kind of digesting those questions, filling them in, a couple of housekeeping items would be that if you have questions, I think this is probably going to take about 40 minutes. I don't think it's going to take the full 60 minutes. And so if you have a question, I would ask that you would put it in the Q&A section. So find the Q&A kind of pop up, save the chat for chat, and I'm going to post something into the chat later on as well. But save the chat for chat, and if you have questions, put them in the Q&A. And the reason that I asked for that is because I have the ability to save those questions. So I could use them for future education of other clients. I can also address, if I don't get a chance to address them tonight, I can address them at another point as well. So for those of you who are just hopping on, I've launched a poll. It's only 2 questions. If you'd be willing to participate, that'd be great. I'm just very curious to kind of know, you know, some of the outcomes, I guess, if you will, of some of those questions that I've got in terms of where you're at in your journey, and then what you feel might be kind of something getting in the way of you making a move. So I'm gonna shut that poll down in like a minute, and then I'm gonna get started right into this as well. We'll give everybody just another brief little bit. I'm gonna take a drink. Okay, and so far, so I'm seeing the majority of people who have answered the poll are first-time home buyers, and then I'm surprised by the answer to number 2, because with Toronto, and assuming that many of you are kind of Toronto-based, that Toronto being an expensive market, it's not necessarily the down payment capital that would be the biggest obstacle. It's the monthly affordability, which is interesting because the down payment capital can be a big problem for people as well. But nobody out of the 8 respondents so far has said that that's a concern. It's more of monthly affordability. Oh, both. Okay, so 2 people saying both. So that's fair. And then 3 people saying not knowing what the right kind of decision is, which is fine. And hopefully tonight will help with that. So I'm going to end the polling. Thank you so much for participating. That's interesting kind of fodder for me, I guess. And I'm going to save those results for later. So again, in the chat, if you wouldn't mind letting me know that you can see my screen okay, big red, how to find value in an expensive market. And then I'm going to get going with the slides and everything. So if somebody wouldn't mind in the chat just saying, yep, I can see everything, we're good to go. Screen okay, yep, awesome, thank you. All right, appreciate the enthusiasm. Okay, so welcome. and thank you for joining. The response to this has been really fantastic and overwhelming, and I think it is obviously has to do with the topic, right? So how to find value in an expensive market. Whether that's Toronto, whether that's Vancouver, whether that's Ottawa, Montreal, whatever it is that's expensive to you, it's a challenge for people, right? Housing prices over the past 2 decades, whatever, have essentially only gone up in Ontario, in Southern Ontario, and a lot of Canada. And so being able to find a way for a purchase to make sense is an important topic. And we had, I think, something like 75, 80 people register for this, which is, it's not a room of 4,000 or anything like that, but for just kind of a solo guy putting something out there, there's been a really big response. So it's humbling, and at the same time, I recognize the challenges that people have with the market. So what's going to be talked about tonight? So I'm going to go over a brief introduction. I'm going to offer some strategies for houses or condos, and then I'll get into houses specifically and then condos specifically. So regardless of what category you're in terms of what you think you're going to purchase, I will go over some good ideas and tips and tricks. You are going to want to stick around. I do have a warning for you at the end, and I'm not it's appropriate for me to give the warning at the end and not just kind of say it now so that you could leave. It doesn't make sense for me to say it right now. So you want to make sure that you stick around, or if you're watching the recording, make sure that you do go to the end, because I've got an important tidbit towards the end. Please don't skip all the way to the end if you're watching the recording. And then just a few closing thoughts. Now, the first thing that I want to say is that I appreciate probably why you're all here, but I don't have necessarily a magic bullet or a secret sauce. There's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to be able to magically make a 3-bed, that was me waving my wand, by the way, I don't know if you saw that gesture or not, but there's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to be able to allow let's say a 3-bed, 3-bath detached house with parking and a yard in Toronto to sell for, livable of course, for 700 grand, right? You need a time machine in order for that to exist. So if that's something that you're looking for, that just does not exist. What the premise for tonight is going to be to identify things that make demand for properties lower in order to reduce competition, because that's what the market has been and probably will continue to be for the foreseeable future. And so we're going to identify factors for properties that can reduce demand. That gives you a little bit of an edge. Demand being reduced will reduce potential purchase prices, but they will be, in some people's eyes, and maybe some of the things that I'm going to talk about tonight for some of you, these factors are going to be undesirable. The idea is, like, which of these factors can you tolerate? And then the more that you can tolerate, the more of a discount you're going to get when you buy a house. So that's kind of the idea. But again, I have not yet invented a time machine. I also have a small gift for you. No, it is not your down payment, as much as I would love to be able to do that for somebody. I do have something to give to you towards the end, and that gift is also a little bit of a gift now. If you are a note taker, you don't necessarily have to take notes. I've got something that I'll be giving to you another time that will be a great supplement to this, that means that you won't have to take notes. And also, if you are if the thing that I give you afterwards, you're like, I wish I'd take my own notes, you'll get this recording as well. So you could do it again and get whatever notes it is that you would want to do. So just bear that in mind. You don't necessarily have to take notes. I prefer that you just kind of kick back and relax and just engage and observe and listen. So the other thing that I want to say before we get going is that I'm going to use a lot of examples that are Toronto based, but really the logic can be applicable to any housing market in the world. Okay, so I'm a Toronto agent. I'm going to talk about Toronto stuff, but the logic applies everywhere. very little bit about me, because this isn't about me, it's about you. But just for those of you who don't necessarily know who I am a sales representative with Bosley Real Estate. I'm a real estate agent. I haven't always been a real estate agent. I was a teacher, high school math and science for 9 years before I made a move to the city for the love of my life. And I'm here now and love it, and can't picture myself living anywhere else necessarily, but I haven't always been a teacher, and that's where this kind of comes from, is a place of giving and a place of education. And then certifications. I mean, I'm a licensed realtor, but I'm also a certified negotiation expert as well. So, but I want to get into the beef, the bulk of why you're here, right? The reason that you're here. So I'm going to start off talking about some general strategies for whether you're buying a house or a condo. Now, the central focus of these next few things that I'm going to identify is going to be location. And I'm only going to say this once, because I throw up a little bit of my mouth every time I hear it as well. So I get you might as well. Location, location, location. There, I said it. I'm not going to do it again. The central focus of the things that I'm going to talk about have to do with location, but not just location itself, but factors that are influenced by location. So I want to start off by talking about transit. And transit is obviously a big factor in Toronto. It's a very controversial topic in Toronto, but it could apply to other areas. You think about some of the transit developments that are going on towards the Niagara region, towards Durham. 407 being extended out to Peterborough has had tremendous influences on the property values in that area, just as an example. So transit is a really big factor. And so when you're looking at properties and you're trying to identify stuff that might be a little bit less expensive, can you identify properties that are located in an area where transit exists, but it might be undervalued? And I'll give you an example, Toronto-based, of course. Eglinton West Station. So if you look at Eglinton Station on the Yonge line, right? So Shepherd, Finch, Lawrence, Eglinton, et cetera, moving down towards Union. That subway line is rammed when we're not in a pandemic, of course. And maybe not in the future. I do think it will get back that way. But anyway, has been historically jam-packed to get to Union on that side of the subway. On the other side, the University line, it's not as busy, and historically has not been. And so if you can be within an area of the University line, it's probably less expensive than if you're on the other side, on the Yonge line. And you'll get to Union or downtown in around the same amount of time. And so Eglinton West Station is a great example. You've got houses that are west of Marley. So we're talking like Allen Road and Eglinton, kind of west of that kind of intersection, where you could be very accessible to downtown and pay a lot less for a house than being in other areas that are just as accessible to downtown. Another example would be St. Clair West. So that's why I put a big picture of the streetcar. St. Clair West is one of the few places in the city that has a dedicated streetcar access. So can't be influenced by what's going on with cars, which can be a big factor for buses and streetcars in other parts of the city. But yet St. Clair West, if you go west of Oakwood, and certainly west of, Oakwood is west of Bathurst, but as you continue towards, Dufferin and Caledonia and that kind of stuff, the housing is, relatively speaking, affordable compared to other places that have maybe not even as good access to transit. Now, there's other reasons why the housing is affordable. We'll get into that stuff a little bit later, but just two examples within the city. Next thing would be future development for transit. So again, using Eglinton West Station, right now you've already got great access to downtown. Whenever the Eglinton LRT is finished, you'll have great access east and west across the city as well. So another reason why that Eglinton West area is a great area to keep an eye on. But there's another neighborhood that is called Mount Dennis, and that's in like the Jane and Eglinton area, extends almost up to Jane and Weston. That area is undergoing some development in transit right now that will make it the second largest transit hub in the city of Toronto after Union Station. So if you think Union Station is a big deal, Mount Dennis is going to be a really big deal in terms of a transit hub. access to UP Express, access to extension of a GO line, big bus terminal, and then the Eglinton LRT whenever it's finished. So there's an area that has not gentrified yet, and will have access to all parts of the city and beyond from that location. Just north of Mount Dennis is an area called Weston that already has access to UP Express and that future GO extension. And so another area that is one to keep an eye out for. Just checking my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything about that. No, I did not. So the caveat would be, do not, or try not to, purchase based on announcements or speculation. So consider buying properties in neighborhoods where there's future development once shovels have broken the dirt. Because as we know with certainly, I'd say it, government related projects, right? They take forever. There's tons of red tape and governments change and projects get scrapped or altered or whatever the case is. So you just want to make sure you don't get caught in buying based on what could happen. You want to buy based on what will happen, but early enough in the process that you'll reap the benefits of seeing some development in the area and seeing growth in prices and in your investment. Next thing I would say about transit is, if you're not already, be a better walker. My walking distance is probably under 15 minutes, and I'd like to keep it to 10. If you are like 20, 25 minutes able to like comfortably walk to a transit station or whatever the case is, you will pay less money for a property. So being a good walker is helpful. Next thing would be school catchment areas. So I don't think it will come as a surprise to any of you to hear that neighborhoods that are in what would be considered really good school catchment areas are expensive neighborhoods, and houses that are in areas that would be considered poor school catchment areas are not as expensive. I push back on the whole idea of what is a good school and what is a bad school, coming from a place of being an educator. When I first got hired for the school that I taught, I had people approach me saying like, oh yeah, you're not going to want to stick around there too long. A bad school, it's rough, drugs, kids are terrible, whatever. School is amazing. The kids were lovely. It's the only school that I taught at in Ontario. I taught overseas as well, but and I think actually one of my former students is watching. So if you are, you know, you were a part of it. But what a great school. The kids were amazing. The parents were incredible. They were supportive. The staff was incredible. So like, it just wasn't true. And on top of that, certainly in Toronto, if you look in the bottom left corner, you see that 6.3 Fraser Institute. So the Fraser Institute is like this think tank, I guess, that produces reports that ranks the schools with a number, but they only use literacy and numeracy, like testing scores, which are highly controversial and highly criticized, certainly amongst people in the education world. So, and yet those rankings are used very heavily by your average person to decide whether a school is any good or not before they've sent a kid there. So those scores do not include or account for community, sense of community, you know, like athletics or arts or anything like that. And again, when we talk about like literacy scores, for example, like what a disservice to neighborhoods and areas that tend to be kind of welcoming areas for some of our new Canadians. We've had so much immigration to the GTA. So sure, literacy scores might suffer a little bit because English is like their third language. I can barely master English. So I just think that the Fraser Institute, a little bit of an education rant there, so I apologize, but I just think those Fraser Institute ranking scores do a total disservice to a lot of schools and a lot of communities. So I don't tend to put a ton of stock into it necessarily. The middle picture there, no kids. So if you already know lifestyle-wise and just kind of what you have planned for yourself, if you don't have any intentions of having children, then a poor school catchment area might not be a detrimental factor for you. And so you could live in a neighborhood where, as long as everything else is okay, you know, if the school's not that great, but if you don't have kids going there, and it is in fact a poor school, which do exist, of course, those can off your back and you can buy a property for less. So that's something to consider. And then the last thing would be, are there neighborhoods that border on good school catchment areas that are close by? And could you reap the benefits of being in a pretty good neighborhood that might go to a different school, but that might change over time due to its proximity to another kind of really well-established, known, good school area? Take a quick breath and a quick drink. Now, I want to say that this one, I debated whether I even put anything in this, because I do feel strongly about having a great relationship with a really good realtor. Obviously biased, but I think the fact that some of you are here and then I had 80 people kind of sign up for this thing, it is a little bit of a testament, and I think I'm demonstrating that you can get value from somebody who's a professional in their field. But to give you some like real life examples of things that I've done and that good realtors do for their clients, the top left corner, yikes. So I'm working with a young couple. I'm not sure if they're live now, but I know that they signed up for this thing and they'll watch it. We got involved, submitted an offer on a property. We got beat out by another buyer by a very small amount of money, unfortunately. I hate to admit it, but can't win them all. They liked the building, they liked the area, they really liked that unit and that floor plan, and there's another floor plan in the building that I feel they would probably appreciate and like. So what I have the ability to do is to look into, okay, what other units in this building have that layout or floor plan, or one that's very, very similar. I'm going to write them a letter, and I'm going to say, I'm working with this young couple. We lost out specifically on your neighbor, unit 5, whatever. We had a great offer, but we were beat up just a little bit, but we're ready to go and, happy to write an offer on a place. We just need to find a willing seller. We and my buyers want to be in this building and in one of these 2 layouts. If you live in one of these places and you've had any thoughts of selling, you can contact me or contact your realtor if you've got a great contact, somebody that you know, like, and trust. So that yikes is what I put on at the top of the letter in really big letters to grab somebody's attention when they open the envelope. If you know a little bit of a bigger area where you want to be, so say like one of these 3 or 4 streets, then a great realtor might draft up a postcard and either drop it off by hand or enlist Canada Post to deliver it for them. That's something certainly that I would spend a little bit of money on for my clients, to try and find a potential opportunity that isn't available right now, and not just sitting and waiting for things to come up on MLS. If it's a bigger geographical area that you want to be in, so say like I want to be in East York, but I don't really care where exactly, like I don't need to be in a specific neighborhood, then I could run a Facebook ad, or a great realtor could run a Facebook ad, and tell a little story about what it is they're looking for and who they're working with. And somebody who's thinking of selling, contact me, contact your realtor. Let's see if we could put something together that would be mutually beneficial for everyone. Last thing would be, I know that I look at old listings that did not sell, and I don't know why they didn't sell. So I reach out to the realtor that had the listing at the time. Hey, I've got some clients who want to live in that building. I saw that some clients of yours were thinking about selling back in 2018, but they never sold. Do they have interest in selling now? Why didn't they sell before? Whatever. Establishing those relationships, and then not using those relationships, but a byproduct of having those relationships is having a good connection with people who might have some off-market properties. Again, other realtors who are having those conversations, and maybe there's a scenario or a situation where things kind of get put together. They don't happen often. Sellers want to let the whole world know that their place is for sale, but there are some sellers who want to do things a little bit more low-key, a little bit more privately, and maybe there's an opportunity there. So I do think there's value in having a relationship with a great realtor who's gonna work and hustle for you. Okay, so let's get into the strategies specifically for buying a house, often referred to as freehold properties. These are properties where you don't necessarily have any fixed condominium fees, and that you own the property, you own the land, and you can, for the most part, do what you want with it, within the rules of the municipality, of course, and your neighbors' bylaws, all that kind of stuff. So. This would not be a home buyer educational thing. if I didn't talk about up and coming neighborhoods. So I won't spend too much time on it because it's kind of another one of those things that kind of make people gag sometimes. Up and coming is absolutely realtor code for a little bit rough around the edges. Not going to lie about that. But again, getting back to what is it that I can tolerate? If you don't feel unsafe in a certain area, if you don't feel like it's a detriment to be in a certain neighborhood that's got a little bit of gentrification to do or to come. I had clients of mine that bought a place a year and a half ago. They specifically wanted to be in a place that was a little bit rough around the edges. They appreciated the character. They appreciated the kind of the ongoings. A little bit tough for me to describe, but they kind of worded in a way that was like, okay, you want to look in this area. I mean, this was a year and a half ago, but they got a 3-bed, 2-bath, semi-detached property for like 700 and something thousand, not that long ago, in an area that not a lot of people consider as a, like a hot destination, if you will. But they've got a house that they could live in for like 15 years if they wanted to, for, relatively speaking, little money compared to those, hot neighborhoods or well-known neighborhoods. Curb appeal. So, but not like this, because again, we're talking about things that would be detrimental or would kind of bring it down. So not a beautifully looking outdoor property, but something like this. And some of you might recognize this house. You've probably seen it on the internet and that kind of stuff. Now look, if you are living in this house and you have no intentions of selling or whatever, and you want to decorate it like this, fine. But if you try to sell your house like this, I can guarantee you're selling for less than the other houses on the street that won't look like this. But if you, a buyer, see a property, and this is obviously an extreme example, right? But think of a place that just doesn't look that pretty on the outside. You will pay, and again, it's tough to say it with an exact science, but anywhere from, generally speaking, 5 to 14% less, based on properties that have a really nice curb appeal. That's a huge, like when we're talking, average price in Toronto is now $932,000 or something like that. 5%, I mean, we're talking about 25 grand, right? Like that's money. So a house with poor curb appeal can be your friend. So, when you're looking through pictures and stuff like that, be like, ooh, overgrown garden, I like that one. And not the one that's got like the beautifully landscaped and manicured shrubs and trees and flower beds and that kind of stuff, because it's all about that first impression. I am a big proponent of buying places that need work. And I don't mean like the house is sinking in one corner, you need to jack it up and repair the foundation, although I have had buyers who have done that, and it was more costly than they were hoping. But I also think that they got into a place that made sense for them kind of money wise. But that ugly duckling property, the place that requires cosmetic changes, but cosmetic changes that are relatively easy to do. So like paint is a great example that is relatively easy, or a cosmetic change that is relatively inexpensive. Paint is a great example. So if you notice a theme, like paint has a huge ROI, like return on investment, sorry, for home sellers. And I'm shocked at the number of people who don't do it. So paint is an example of something that is easy, not terribly expensive to do, and can really change the look and feel of a property. The other thing that I would say, and it's, it says, listen to Jamie reminisce. So like, I'm like a retired person in a 38-year-old body, but it feels like something that has changed over the course of my career, and certainly I think changed from kind of previous generations, is the willingness to live in a property that is not the way you want it to look cosmetically. And I don't know if it's like a judgment thing or like an embarrassment thing, where like you've got a dated kitchen so you can't have people over for dinner or something. Like, I don't know exactly what it is, because I don't necessarily get into the psychology of it. And I might be kind of preaching to the choir here, because those of you who are here, you're probably like a practical lot of people. But don't feel obligated to like make changes before you get in, or right away, like, well, I need to buy this place, but I need to save an extra 20K because I need to redo the kitchen and the bathroom. Like, if it's livable, like do it over time. Yeah, it's not convenient, and you know, you're gonna live through some dust and some noise and that kind of stuff, but you're gonna save big time on your wallet. So just something to bear in mind is that, like, kind of live through some of those changes. I know that growing up in, I'll use myself as an example. My parents changed the home. They're still in the same house that we moved into in 1989. They've gone through changes over time. And I think that's made it much more affordable, and they were able to kind of spend a certain amount when they first bought that home. Obviously, in 1989, it was probably $8 or something like that for the house, but be that as it may. I'm kidding, by the way. If anybody bought a house in '89, I know they weren't $8. I'm just joking. Big game hunting, and look, I'm not a big fan of hunting. Like, I have a degree in zoology. I love animals, but I got a kick out of the vision of thinking about you know, having your funny safari hat with the binoculars, kind of looking for things like hideous wallpaper, original kitchen cabinets, colorful fixtures. Who has a grandparents, either, you know, still with us or you know, in your life, who had a house that had pink, purple, or green, like bathtubs, sinks, toilets, that kind of stuff, right? So you want to find those things because they're not terribly hard to like fix and change, but that house that has one or all three of those things or whatever is going to cost you so much less than a house that has been done, right? So so just something to bear in mind. The type of property can have a big influence on how much it's going to cost, and I'll go through a couple of examples. This house here is an example of something that's called a 1.5 story. A lot of people don't know what a 1.5 story is. People know bungalows, people know 2 stories or more, but a 1.5 story property is not something that's commonly, and they're not common either, which is probably why people don't necessarily know a lot about them. But what it is, it's a bungalow with another level on top of it that almost kind of fits into what you would consider like attic space. So you would have a room or space that has sloped ceilings on the side, but they're generally wide enough where you could get like a queen or a king size bed up there and not get out of bed and smack your head into the slope. Or you could use that space as a, you know, a kid's play area or rec space. It's accessible usually by like a regular staircase, so it's not like you have to like climb up a fire pole or something like that to get there, although that would be fun. But the down part probably more so than the up. Like usable space in a house. Compare that with your typical Toronto 2-story, and why would you want to identify a property like a 1.5 story? What I did was I looked at the last half of 2019, just because the first half of 2020 obviously has been weird. Probably not news to you, but the last half of 2019 in East York, which tends to have the majority of the 1.5 stories out there, on average, I can't remember if I did 2 or 3 bedrooms, probably 3 bedroom, but your average 3-bedroom 1.5 story sold for $907,000. Your average 2-story sold for 1.2 million. So if you can buy a 1.5 story, and it might not be enough like space for you to stay in for 15 years or whatever, but is it an opportunity for you to get onto the market, onto the property ladder or into the market, so that you don't have to make that kind of extra jump up? And so the 1.5 story is a nice kind of intermediary. And who knows, maybe the market goes in a way where instead of moving, what you do is you take the top off your 1.5 story and put on a new level as a renovation, because that would cost you less than making the move from your 1.5 story to the 2-story. Just an example of something that could do, or you do an extension off the back or whatever. So something to consider. Property type matters. Another thing would be looking at, again, if you could find a freehold townhome that is an end unit, or an end unit of a row house. They're very similar, obviously. So you look at this and you say, okay, that one that's kind of front and center in the picture, almost looks like a semi-detached. You've got those 2 front doors. One is for the one unit, the other one is for the one. But when I show you this next picture, that's a big long row of properties with the one on the end that's for sale. So the one on the end is going to certainly sell for more than the one kind of next to it that does not have that one side exposed. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but you can see the one on the end will have a little bit of window space. So you're going to get some extra light into your main floor. You know, in some, you might have some windows on the upper floor. That's some extra light. You're going to pay for that, but you'll pay less, typically on average, for an end unit row house or an end unit townhouse than you would a semi-detached. But structurally, they're very similar, right? You share one wall with neighbors, you don't share two, and you get that little bit of extra light on the sides. So, you know, something like that could be a property type to identify, to kind of bring down that budget a little bit, or that, not your budget, but bring down the eventual purchase price of a property. Okay, my condo people. So I know you've been waiting. I didn't necessarily do houses first for any reason, but if you're on here, you could be very much in the condo market, and again, due to affordability being such an issue. So we're gonna deal with some condo strategies. Condominiums would be properties that come with fixed fees. So condominiums itself, townhouses that are part of a condominium corporation, so condo townhouses. I'm going to talk very quickly about cooperatives and co-ownerships as well, which are another type of property that are a little bit different. There's a lot of nuance to them. I'm not going to get into too much detail, but they're a thing. Again, up and coming, realtor code for rough around the edges, but your up-and-coming areas for condos are quite often very different from your up-and-coming areas for houses. So for the housing areas I mentioned, Mount Dennis, Weston, Danforth and Maine is another really great area for an up-and-coming area for houses. For condos, it's Moss Park, so it's like the southeast kind of corner of downtown, close to the water. So like, east of Jarvis and Sherbourne, Richmond, Adelaide, that kind of area. It's Regent Park. It's there's actually some condos going up at Danforth and Maine. I was in one, Thursday. I was in one last night on Trent Avenue with some buyers. City Place. I know what City Place's nickname is, but it's an area that actually has seen a lot of tremendous growth because of its reputation and stuff like that. And the City Place actually has seen some huge gains in the past 2 years, year over year, in terms of prices. So lots of growth as far as that purchase price. So identifying up-and-coming areas for condos is as important as it is for houses. That being said, areas that are already established and have a lot of density could provide opportunities for places to get a lower purchase price. So, downtown, Liberty Village, Yonge and Egg, City Place as well, even though it's kind of a blend between high density and kind of up and coming. But the idea is that in areas of high density, anybody who goes to sell runs the risk at being on the market at the same time as another unit in their building or in the neighborhood that's very similar to theirs. That is one of the seller's worst nightmares. You've got a 2-bed, 2-bath, 800 square feet, parking, you're on the 5th floor, you're facing east, you list your property for sale, 2 days later, same unit, same layout, same floor plan, parking, whatever, but 2 floors above you or 2 floors below you, whatever, comes on the market, you're now competing with the same pool of buyers. So conversely, for you, the buyers, is identifying those potential opportunities that could come up. For those of you who know me, you might be familiar with the idea that I'm very much engrossed in the Yonge and Egg leasing community, and so it's a neighborhood that I know very, very well. Right now, there's not a huge amount of resale condos available, but what there are is a huge amount of rental condos available. There's over 300 rental condos available in Yonge and Eglinton between all the buildings. Some new buildings are coming up, and there's a lot of more supply. So vacancy, places are going vacant just a little bit longer in order to find the right tenant, unless there's already a tenant in it, but many of them are vacant due to COVID. People have moved out and kept it empty in order to find a new person to move in. So for all those condos that are owned by like individual homeowners and condo owners, how long do they let a place go empty for before they say, okay, I'm not getting the rates that I wanted to because rates are coming down because supply is up? My place is staying vacant longer than I can afford or that I want. And so how long before those rental owners become sellers? So nothing's happening right now in terms of, you know, supply skyrocketing in a place like Yonge and Eglinton, but certainly there are indications that that could happen. So that's something to keep an eye on for potential opportunities coming down the road. Older buildings. So I do air quotes around the word older. I don't necessarily advocate for buildings that are kind of 30 plus years old necessarily, but right in the sweet spot around like 10 to 15-ish years old. The lobbies, the hallways, the interior of the properties might look a little bit dated, but the building itself is not really that old. The mechanics, all those kind of expensive systems for the building are not really that old and still have lots of life yet left. But there's that little bit of a dated look, and so, you know, the price per square foot for some units in those buildings are a little bit on the lower side. This picture is from a unit in a building that I love. It's my favorite building in the whole city from a value perspective. And the only thing you want to make sure, and this building is a fabulous example of a building that's a little bit dated. You can see that, you know, white appliances and the cabinetry color that is, you know, very like kind of mid 2000s, 2010-ish, early 2010s. But the building is being run very, very well and has everything in check in terms of maintenance fees and that kind of stuff. So older buildings are great as long as maintenance fees have not gotten out of hand. If they have, could be something to avoid, but if they've got everything kind of in check, could be a really great opportunity. Amenities. And I speak from experience. My wife and I own a condo right now in a building that has 24-hour concierge and an indoor pool that doesn't really get used very much, but is very expensive to maintain, and expensive property management. You know, a gym again that doesn't get used all that well, but costs money to kind of upkeep and that kind of stuff. They can have an effect on your maintenance fees. So get into a building that either has no amenities or has the amenities that you want and will use. And if you think that you're going to use them a lot, I can almost guarantee that you're not going to use them nearly as much as you think you're going to, unless you're already living in like a rental condo and, you know, you use the pool all the time. Great, buying a building that's got a pool, you'll get great use out of it. But I guarantee there are lots of people who regret buying in a building that's got a pool because they never use it and they are paying for it in their maintenance fees. So something to consider. Undesirable units. So this is obviously a very general category for condos, but like each condo has something about it, could have something about it that would be undesirable. So there are lots of different examples, like could have bad layout, could have a poor view. The two pictures on the left are examples of lower units in a stacked townhouse complex. So the idea is that I'm sure many of you have seen townhouse complexes where you either have to go up a small set of stairs to get to the front door, or you have to go down a small set of stairs to get to the front door. The lower units, the ones where you have to go down, are semi-subterranean. This one isn't necessarily, but there are lots that that have a little bit like less natural light. And then you've also got people living above you, and so you'll pay a reduced price. For sure you will. Can you tolerate that? Is that something that you don't mind? And if you look at the bottom left picture, you'll see that that unit in particular actually is on the corner. So you might get some nice light because you've got windows on the front and windows on the side. So it might not be that much of an issue, but it will be cheaper than the unit above, almost guaranteed. The terrace, for whatever reason, isn't as attractive or desirable as the upper units that have the rooftop terrace. The rooftop terrace is a little bit more sexier, I guess, if you will, right? So another thing, if you look at the picture on the right, I know it's a little bit of a sliver of one, but first floor units typically are not as expensive because for some people, there are security and privacy issues. So if that's not as much of a concern for you, then look at first floor units. Because you'll pay a little bit less for them, unless, like, there are exceptions, of course, but I would say generally speaking, most first floor units are less expensive than anything on the second and up floor. Okay, we're almost at the end, and I'm looking at the time, and I'm about 42 minutes into this. So yeah, I'm less than 5 minutes away from finishing. So I have a warning. And this was the warning that I kind of talked about at the beginning of this whole thing. For pretty much every factor that I've identified that will allow you to buy at a little bit of a discount, maybe a lot of a discount, I don't know. If you buy for a discount, you're probably going to sell for a discount. And you need to go into that and set your expectations accordingly. Now, that's not necessarily the case for all of the factors that I identified. Obviously, for one that you can improve the curb appeal, or you can change the cabinets and get rid of that ugly wallpaper and change the purple tub to a regular white tub, or whatever the case is. Things that you can change, great. But a lot of the factors that I mentioned cannot be changed. So you're going to buy for discount, and then that factor is probably still going to be present whenever it is that you go to sell. And so you're going to sell at a discount as well. As long as you factor that into your expectations, you shouldn't have any issues with kind of the mental aspect of buying at a discount and then selling when it comes time to sell as well. So that's just something that I wanted to kind of, I wanted to plant that seed just to, I'm all about expectations. And so something that somebody might not necessarily consider until it's brought up to them. They're like, oh, right. So this isn't necessarily going to be like an incredible investment 10 years from now, because I'm going to see similar gains to what the property saw before, because those factors aren't necessarily going away, like it backs onto the railway tracks, something like that. Closing thoughts. So I talked about a gift earlier in the presentation. So I've got a guide. So you'll notice that all these slides were just like pictures and really quick, brief talking points. I've got a guide that basically has all this stuff written out for you. So I'm going to send you a copy. It's PDF. I am not necessarily a book editor, so I don't know how pretty it is or whatever, but it's got all the right kind of content in it for you. So if you take that and supplement it with this this presentation, which you'll get the recording of, then you're set in terms of learning a lot about how to look for properties and find value in a place like Toronto that's very expensive. So consider that your section of notes, and then you can use it to kind of make more notes if you want to, for sure. And then I also have an offer, and that offer would be, looking at the poll and seeing that some people kind of answered like, I don't know necessarily what the next right steps are. I want to offer you a personalized buyer consultation. Now I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to head to, because I need to get a link for something that I am going to throw in the chat. And so you will see it right now. It's a Calendly link. And if you click on that link, and I'm going to email it to you as well. So if you're watching the recording, you're like, well, I can't access the chat. Then so be it. I'm going to email it to you. You'll have access to it. But, sorry, I'm just going back to there we go. I am happy to do a complimentary buyer consultation with you. So 30 minutes of my time, no problem, to chat about what your obstacles are, free of charge, no strings attached. I'm all about giving, I'm all about education, and I want to help. I, of course, would love the opportunity to work with people. It is my job. It is how I get paid, is to help people buy and sell property. But at the same time, I view myself as more of a consultant than anything. And then if that person decides to work with me and we end up kind of doing, finding them the right place or selling the right place or whatever, then amazing. But you can use that Calendly link to set up a consultation with me. It's 30 minutes. I think I've offered 3 different times during the day between now and the end of the summer, where you can get some time with me and we can do something a little bit more personalized. So looking at your needs, your wants, making sure that your expectations in terms of what you want to buy and where it is and what those things might cost all kind of match up, because that's a big part of your search. And just trying to see if we can make sure that things are feasible and reasonable. So that's something that I want to offer as well. Just consulting my notes to make sure that I didn't miss anything. I think that's it. So I want to, forgot one thing, sorry. So you can find me very easily. Go to Facebook, type Jamie Harnish, my name. YouTube, same thing, Jamie Harnish, Toronto Real Estate Navigator. Instagram, @Jamie Harnish. That is my cell phone number there, 428-8892. That's my email address, jharnish@bosleyrealestate.com. I'm very accessible. I think if you look at my Google reviews, probably a very common theme that you'll see is that people will talk about how kind of responsive I am, and how much I want to help and guide. And so I'm here to help if I can. But if you've got kind of questions and you're maybe a little bit shy, you'd want to reach out. If you go to either Facebook or YouTube for sure, and then some stuff on Instagram, you will find, I think I've done now 127 or 128 educational videos, some for buyers, some for sellers, some for renters, but there's good tidbits and nuggets in pretty much any video, even if it's seller based, because you can kind of, if it's for sellers, you get into the mentality of the seller and the way that I would think as a listing agent as well, and they would be very beneficial. So I'm easily found, and I've also put a lot of stuff out there to try and help educate. So now I'm finished, and I want to thank you very much for those of you who are still around. Let's see, there's still a good number of you, so thanks for sticking with this. I've got probably 15 to 20 minutes if anybody wants to do a little bit of a Q&A. Your way to do the Q&A would be to type into the Q&A. So I want to see, nobody's asked any questions yet, but I am happy to answer any questions that somebody wants to kind of stick around and type into the Q&A section. And if you, for whatever reason, can't see the Q&A and you want to type into the chat, I can now kind of monitor the chat as well because my presentation is finished. So thank you for being here. And again, I'll kind of hang out. And I've got a question. Okay, Jenny, hi. So Jenny asks, one concern I always had looking at outdated, oh my goodness, I can't read. One concern I always had looking at outdated looking properties was that it would translate into outdated mechanics and bigger non-cosmetic problems. What are some tips on making sure an outdated looking property doesn't have more major issues? So it's a great question. You know, one thing would be a home inspection. You know, admittedly, a home inspection is as good as the inspector. And in the way the Toronto real estate market has gone is that you usually have to rely on the inspection that's been provided for you by the person that's hired by the seller. And so is it biased? I mean, I don't know that I would necessarily consider it biased because I don't believe that anybody's doing anything shady per se, but not all home inspectors are created equal. So the home inspection is probably the best way. But even that is not necessarily perfect. You know, the problem is that major mechanical stuff is typically behind walls and is buried, and no seller is going to give you the ability to like punch a hole in a wall and to take a look in places where you shouldn't be looking unless you own the place. So it's tough. And Jenny, admittedly, that's not an easy one to deal with, but a home inspection would be a start for sure. Any other? I hope that answered your question, and answered that for anybody else who asked as well. See something popping up in the chat, so I'm going to take a look. Can the buyer pay and arrange for his or her own inspection is a question from Neil. So yes, absolutely, a buyer can pay for and arrange their own inspection. Part of the issue with that is timing. A lot of places in Toronto are on the market for a week or less, especially lately with properties that are open to receiving what's called a bully or a preemptive offer. If you're seeing a place and you're in East York and it's a really cute 2-bed, 2-bath place with parking and it's listed for $799, if it's not, you know, if the listing agent and the seller don't really hold their ground until their offer date next week, it will sell in a bully or preemptive offer within 24 to 48 hours of being on the market. So how do you have the time to see the place, know that you like it enough that you want to fork out $400 to $600 for a home inspection, get the inspection done, get the report back, take a look at the report and all that kind of stuff before you have to, you know, make your offer. That can be tough. And so that's why sellers do a pre-listing home inspection and make that available, so that they don't lose out on the opportunity of buyers not wanting to get involved because there's no home inspection available. So yes, is the answer to your question, but it's challenging for sure. Another question or comment from Daisy. So she says, thank you, you're welcome. Relation to home inspection. So what happens if the home inspection does not come back with good reviews? Would you have to make your offer first to do it? Okay, so it depends on, I should probably read that question out for the people who are watching the recording. Sorry, I forgot that there's a lot of people who are going to be watching the recording. So the question is, if the home inspection comes back without good reviews, can I do the home inspection first and then make my offer after? Or can I, like, is there, I'm going to summarize a little bit, Daisy, but like, is there some kind of way of doing it so that I'm not necessarily like trapped into an offer after getting a report back that is not terribly favorable? Daisy, have I summed that up? Exactly. Okay. She said exactly. All right. So there's a bunch of different scenarios when it comes to home inspections. So first of all, if you're seeing a place and the seller has provided a home inspection, you would get a chance to look at it and go over it with your realtor, with your parents, potentially with the inspector who did it, or another home inspector to kind of walk you through. You can hire home inspectors to kind of walk you through a report, and you might be able to do that a little bit faster than kind of teeing up your own home inspection. And you would be able to take in that information and that stuff before you make an offer. That's kind of the idea. If a property is on the market without an offer date, meaning that they're taking offers anytime, and it's a little bit of an older home and they have not done a pre-listing home inspection, they may, and by they I mean the sellers and the listing agent, may have an expectation where they're catering to a certain demographic, let's say first-time home buyers, that would be interested in doing a home inspection, and they are open to the idea of receiving an offer that would be conditional upon conducting a home inspection. So how that would work is, sorry, I know this is a really long-winded answer, but like real estate transactions that are in the 8 to 1 point whatever million aren't exactly like just super cut and dry, right? How that would work is you make an offer, you try to come to terms with the seller first. One of the terms in your offer is that you taking over that property would be conditional upon, or I guess another word would be like contingent upon, conducting a home inspection and being satisfied with the outcome of the results of that home inspection. So you would make the offer. If the seller agrees or you come to an agreement, you would have to hand over a deposit. But then you do your home inspection. If it comes back and it's like, oh my God, this place is how is it even still standing? In theory, the idea is that you would say, I'm sorry, Mr. and or Mrs. Seller, but I'd like my deposit back. This place has too many issues. Or you'd say, I'd like to revisit the terms that we agreed upon because I did a home inspection and here's what we found, and I'd still like the house, but I need it for less money in order to kind of deal with these things. So there are some options to do that. But no, you're not necessarily locked into your offer before getting the results from a home inspection. It depends a little bit on the scenario, but for one that's got an offer date and they've got a pre-listing home inspection, you could see it. You could see the home inspection before you even go to the property, possibly. So there's that option as well. So I hope I answered that question, Daisy. I'm gonna pop over to the Q&A. And okay, there's no other new questions. Happy to address anything else. I've got 5 to 10 more minutes if anybody wants to kind of bring anything else up, but otherwise, I hope that was useful and helpful and all that good stuff. I don't know how long I'll like kind of sit here awkwardly with the camera still rolling and recording before I say, okay, nobody's got any other questions, so I'll end it. But okay, so Neil's got another question. Where do I see the current market going? My favorite question. Predict the future is the question. And look, you know, being in the industry, of course, people ask that question of me and of other realtors and probably of mortgage brokers, of economists, and all that kind of stuff. And people expect answers, and I get that. At the same time, I don't think it's unreasonable for me to say that not a single, as far as I know, and I don't believe, that a single human being on the planet can predict the future with certainty. We can make educated guesses and then find out whether our educated guess was correct or not after the events happen. But, you know, my opinion is that very much things are guesses, and that we see, you know, how things play out over time. So as long as you don't kind of hold me to this this prediction, man, the way things are right now are surprising. Prices are up, like, on average, something like, I think it was like 11 or 12%. Prices are up a lot. And despite everything that's going on, I think it'll really depend on whether there's a second wave and whether unemployment continues to rise, and also who becomes unemployed, because there are certain industries that have been hit really hard, but that are made up of the people who work in those industries who weren't necessarily homeowners, or who weren't necessarily going to become homeowners in the near future. You know, so as long as the people who are, like, kind of have, pardon me, the income and the capital available to afford kind of a market like Toronto, and the supply stays the way that it has been, which is really, really low, I don't foresee a future where prices come down anytime soon. I think there would have to be some serious changes to the economy that we're not seeing right now. Now, the economy might be being propped up by government spending. You know, we saw a thing probably on the news the other day about the federal deficit skyrocketing. And that might be because things, again, are being propped up. And once that gravy train ends, is that when the real kind of stuff unveils itself behind the curtain. That certainly could happen. I don't know. But if I were to make a bet right now, I just don't see like major foreclosures. I just don't see major changes to anything. I think we're doing pretty well with the virus. And I think that the economy will kind of pick back up. We'll pay for it through probably taxes. And but I don't see things changing a whole lot from the way that they are, and that's kind of scary. So I don't know if that was a long-winded answer, but I hope that gave you some insight. I have a question from someone else who I think is looking from an investment standpoint. How difficult is it to find a rental positive cash flow property in Toronto? In my opinion, very, very difficult. Now, don't get me wrong. Anything can cash flow depending on what you put down, right? Like, you could buy a house for that's got 2 units in it, it's a duplex, or buy a condo. So let's use a condo as an example. You buy a condo for $600,000 at Yonge and Eglinton. Well, if you put $400,000 down and then you put somebody into it, renting it at $2,000, $2,100 a month, you're probably going to cash flow. But what's your return on your investment, right? Like, if you have to put $400,000 down or a certain percentage down in order to get cash flow, well, why, right? So I think the idea from an investment standpoint is that you put in what you have to, and if it's a rental property, that would be 20% down payment, and then based on that 20%, what you pay on that mortgage, and then what you've got as far as expenses are considered, and once that's all kind of taken care of, do you cash flow on top of that? To do that, to put 20% down on pretty much anything in Toronto is challenging. The only way that I can see doing it is taking a place and turning it into multi-units. So taking a place that maybe is a single-family home, or something that right now has 2 units in it, and finding a way to get a 3rd unit in it, or a place that's got 3 units in it and finding a way to get a 4th unit into it, something like that. So increasing the number of doors, again, within the rules of the bylaws and the zoning and all that kind of stuff, right? Because you have to be careful about duplexes, triplexes, and quads, and then also commercial lending and that kind of stuff when you get to a certain number of units. But positive rental cash flow condos, nope, not unless you're putting big money down. And then the house, you got to increase the number of doors at the house in order to do it. I'm hoping to acquire a new rental property as an investment sometime before 2020 ends. Personally, I won't be looking in Toronto. I'll be looking Niagara way. Had some good conversations with a realtor in Kingston. Windsor. I have a place in Hamilton, and it's fabulous. I bought it in 2016, admittedly, so it's a little bit of a different market. But I'll be looking for cash flow properties in markets outside of Toronto because of cash flow and the importance of cash flow to me. So I hope that answered your question, Mr. or Mrs. Anonymous. I saw something pop up, I think maybe in the chat, so I'm just going to head over to that. And nope, I did not. Okay, so any other questions that I could help address for those of you who are still left? And then I guess for those people who are going to be watching. Okay, so another question. When you factor all the transaction costs, is it still a good investment? Do you mean, is this the same person that asked about the rental cash flow property? And do you mean like a rental cash flow place when you factor everything in? If you could clarify, like I'm assuming this is the same person and you're speaking about a rental property, not your primary residence. Oh, so buying for investment purposes. My opinion is yes. I don't think it would be tough for you to find, doing your own research, that people who over time have become wealthy, whatever that means, right? Like whether that means generationally wealthy or kind of wealthy within their own respects, have done so through real estate. And I don't mean the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezoses of the world and that kind of stuff. I mean, like, your quote unquote average person who starts out buying investment properties at a young age and kind of continues to do so throughout their life. Real estate, I don't think, obviously in short windows, anything can be a bad investment. Like if you bought in 1988 and tried to sell in 1991, you lost money. So, I mean, in short windows, anything can be a bad investment. But long term, I think real estate has shown time after time after time that it's an excellent investment. I certainly believe in it. I will continue to invest in real estate. We have a basement apartment underneath where we're living now. We have an investment condo. We have an investment property in Hamilton. We'll probably be taking that investment condo in Toronto and selling it and turning it into multiple investment properties in some other place outside of the GTA. So yeah, I'm going to do it if that, for what that's worth, right? I'm certainly no expert or guru in terms of like predicting the future, but real estate's got a really good track record. And one of the things that I love about real estate investments is that you can use it as leverage, and you can also acquire an asset that's worth a lot without paying full price for it. And by what I mean by that is you can buy a $500,000 property, and if it's an investment property, you only need $100,000 plus a little bit of money for closing costs and that kind of stuff. But you only need 20% to have the $500,000 asset. If you wanted $500,000 worth of stocks, bonds, whatever, you need $500,000. So you have the ability to leverage money. Now, again, there are ways of finding money in order to buy stocks, right? Like you don't have to have the $500,000 in cash. You could leverage something else. But the point is, if you want something in a stock or bond, whatever, that's valued at $500,000, you need that $500,000 wherever you got it from. A house that's worth $500,000, you need 20%. So, and then on top of that, over time, can you leverage against the property in order to, like, that's how I bought my Hamilton investment property. Was at the time, I don't anymore, but at the time, I owned a townhouse up in Alliston where I used to live. I had a line of credit associated with the house. That was my down payment money for my house in Hamilton. I used leverage. It was not my own money. Like, I mean, it sort of was, but technically it's the bank's money. So yes, again, another long-winded answer, but I'm obviously very passionate about this stuff. So yeah, I'm a big believer in real estate being a good investment, 100%. Anything else? I just want to head over to the chat just to make sure that I didn't miss anything. Okay, nothing there. And then the Q&A, I think I've addressed people's questions. So I'll give like 30 seconds just to see if another question popped up, but otherwise I'm gonna hop off and oh, something in the chat. Oh, just Jenny saying thank you. You're welcome. Thanks for sticking around and thanks for joining. Appreciate it very much. Okay, so I'm gonna say goodbye and say goodnight. Thank you again so much for your time, regardless of when or where you're watching this. And again, you will get an email with the guide and with the link to possibly book an appointment with me if you want for a free 30 minutes in order to get a personalized buyer consultation. So thank you again and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care.